This next honoree, I got to meet for the very first time here at the CAC reunion 2 years ago. I was in discussions with ECW Press about a book about my crazy life, and Michael Holmes, the executive editor, said, well, you know, you have never written a book before, but we love your story, but if you can convince, he gave me two names, one of which was Greg Oliver. I met with Greg here, and he was like, I don't want to do another wrestling book. You know, so, but then he found out my story about country music and baseball, and he kind of was drawn in after some conversations with me, and he later has become my psychologist, because telling him my story, Greg Oliver has become one of my best friends in the business, and I couldn't be prouder for him tonight. He's going to be given this honor tonight by Pam Morrison. But before we bring Pam up, we'd love to play a video of Greg.
The James Melby Historian Award represents the heart and soul of the CAC. A few notable past winners were Mike Rogers, John Luch, Dave Meltzer, Dennis Brett, George Shire, and Tom Burke. All James C. Melby Award winners were voted on by past recipients. Congratulations, Greg Oliver, for winning this year's James C. Melby Historian Award.
Excellent. Let's bring up Pam to present the James C. Melby Award to Mr. Oliver.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I don't know that everyone knows me. I am Pam, JJ's proud daughter, or if you ask Robert and Stephanie. I know Greg, I know. I was just admiring the picture of him on page 10. It's so flattering. A historian is a person who studies and writes about the past, creating a narrative of events, and is regarded as an expert on a subject or an authority. Beyond the ability to write clearly, communicate clearly, a good historian has a depth of knowledge not only about people and events, but they have an ability to understand and to explain the significance. They have a respect, or in this case, even maybe a love for the history of whatever it is that they're documenting, and a curiosity about the why, or the so what, and the ability to really put things in context. So to earn this nomination, I looked it up, and the nomination for the Cauliflower Alley Club's James C. Melby Historian Award, the nominee must be recognized as having conducted major research work, be dedicated to maintaining the history of professional wrestling, and have at least part of his or her historical work published. So essentially, an award-winning professional wrestling historian has all the standard qualities of a historian, coupled with not being put off by a little, or sometimes a lot, of strangeness. Not unlike a successful wrestler, I think the best wrestling writers achieve that elusive balance of substance and style. Greg Oliver, aside from his dubious taste in ties, meets that criteria. I met Greg here, I think it was 15 years ago, or very close, and we became fast friends. Not just because I like to talk and Greg is a good listener, but it's not just the listening. Greg has such empathy and like for everybody. He just has that compassion and understanding. With him, I think it's beyond just lack of judgment and beyond accepting, things as they are, but he really listens with kindness and with grace. And he manages to do all of that in his writing without losing objectivity, which is of course very important. He's well respected because of everything I mentioned, plus the fact that he knows what stories to tell, and he knows what stories not to tell, and he knows what stories it's just not their time yet. He instills trust. I think he gives trust in return. And if you know him, you are probably #Team Oliver. So, because the CAC recognizes through this award that the person who documents history sometimes always is deserving of making history. So it is my privilege to introduce someone who tells your stories accurately, with enough commentary to make them even more interesting, but never makes it about him. My friend, Greg Oliver.
Team Oliver, exactly. Team Oliver has a long history. We got a few guys here, Matt and Carmine and Darla, that know exactly what Team Oliver means. Thanks especially to Pam for the kind words, the CAC for this honor. It was George Napolitano who strong-armed me into buying a ticket back in 1998 in Cherry Hill, and I don't regret it. I've been to almost everyone since, and met Pam and many, many great friends here. I've often joked that pro wrestling journalism is an oxymoron, and I've often questioned why I do what I do. It sure ain't for the money. At its core, pro wrestling is a narrative, and a historian or a journalist's job is to examine that narrative, to unravel it, and in some cases to place it in context in others, all the while fighting against the unreality of it all. Where once it was kayfabe, we now have rewriting or whitewashing of history. Whereas when I write about hockey, or ice hockey as you call it here, it's cut and dry. Who scored, when, and how. Pro wrestling is so much more nuanced, mystery, and by its very nature, deception. That's a big part of its appeal. The contrast to hockey is evident too in the modesty you often get out of hockey players. The puck just bounced right. It's a team game. But pro wrestling, you don't do that. Pro wrestling's the opposite. It's a team effort, yes. You have to have great referees, like a Tim White, or who else do we, well, Charlie Smith. You need to have the referees, you need to have the TV people, you need to have everybody making this package. But at the end of the day, it's an I game. I won the match, I won the belt, I sold out the building. I sold the most t-shirts, is what I hear now. Those who don't believe in themselves selfishly don't believe in pro wrestling. But as a writer, I have to both collect that confidence from you, but then I also have to earn your confidence, and then I have to have the confidence in myself to poke holes in your narrative, because it's not always true. And that's going to ruffle some feathers, right? You're creating this illusion. My job is sometimes to find the truth. I failed too, made mistakes, had to correct and admit them. I've memorialized monsters because I didn't know all the details. This closed pro wrestling world being so protective and secretive, and I've had my detractors through the years. Won't name any names. Pro wrestling's Me Too movement was the speaking out movement, which happened when we were unable to meet here last year during the depths of COVID. There's still more to come. Pro wrestling has some powerful people with much still to atone for. But I can't just write that. You have to have facts. And that makes it really tough, as Pam says, knowing too much. The news media has gotten a bad rap in recent years, and I worked in a newsroom. You couldn't even agree on what to order on pizza. There's no news media doing something evil. It's similar in pro wrestling. Dirt sheets aren't all one big thing. Everybody has their own sort of ideas of what pro wrestling journalism is, or what a historian is. My Canadian wrestling report, I started as a teenager. and I've grown a lot since then. Studied journalism, I know how this works. My favorite classes were the research classes, and I think that it shows up a lot in my writing and when I give reports. To those making a buck on the internet today, writing about pro wrestling, learn your history. It's not just about wrestling. Somebody was there writing about these things before you. I was one of those guys. I was one of those guys that complained to WWE, why is the Wi-Fi not on at WrestleMania? What a simple thought. At the Anaheim Ponds, I had to go into an office of an employee who had to turn on their computer so I could file to a national newspaper chain. It's just insane how much things have changed. And it's great. But I've never done this alone. My mom and dad were supportive with my newsletter, even if mom especially really worried whether I'd ever find a girl. Which brings up my wife Meredith, who stood by me more than 30 years, and she is not a wrestling fan or a sports fan. Yet she managed to write the autobiography of the missing link, Dewey Robertson, who became a dear, dear friend. Because writing is writing, and a subject is a subject, and history is history. You just got to learn them. My son Quinn, who is known as One More Beer to Pam, has come along on a lot of these trips. My frequent writing partner Steve Johnson should probably be up here with me, as we were co-honored together at the Iowa Hall of Fame in 2008 with the Melby Award there. That one is supposed to acknowledge more about journalism, this one's more about history. To me, they are intertwined. He made me both a better writer and a researcher, and that describes Michael Holmes too, as John mentioned, who's a wonderful editor at ECW Press. John Powell and I started Slam Wrestling back in 1996 because we needed a place to house the Calgary Sun columns from Bret Hart, and we started at the right time as wrestling was exploding again. And the Monday Night Wars were right around the corner, and SlamWrestling.net grew into something quite magical with amazing writers, 24 years of content. I have a photographer here, writer, and there would have been a hell of a lot more of us if it wasn't for how hard it is to get across the border right now. We're not done at the website, and I'm not done interviewing people. Unfortunately, while I've been here at the Cauliflower Alley Club, I've written 3 obituaries for wrestlers. Natasha, the Hatchet Lady, who was here 3 years ago, just passed away last night. And so that story got up. And that's why we come to CAC, to spend time with each other, a chance to talk to each other, a chance for me and other writers to talk to each other and talk to the wrestlers. The days of meeting Olivier, or Father Bill Olivier, the Elephant Boy, in the room are long gone. But you guys all have stories. Make sure they get kept. Okay? It may not be me, but somebody needs to keep your story. I've got more stories in me, and I'm not allowed to talk about one of them, or I'm going to get beaten up. But I do want to say, is Shelly even in the room? Jim Melby was a very, very special friend, a great supporter. His daughter isn't here at the moment. I haven't seen her since. Anyways, she's a wonderful person, wonderful supporter, and so is Jim Melby. I think of him all the time when I put on a CD that he made of wrestling music, mostly Sweet Daddy Siki, who became a very close friend, and I worked on his documentary. Wrestling works in wonderful ways, and I've made many great friends, and it just proves that history can be living as well as in the past. Thank you again for the award.
So to sum it up, you're talking franchise, you're talking money, you're talking notoriety, you're talking women, kid stealing, wheeling dealing, limousine riding, jet flying, son of a gun.